Dr. Mindy, I'm so excited to have you on today's podcast. But if someone hasn't heard of you, listen, by the way, I will tell you this in our clinic, your videos are playing like
You're
I
so
think we give
sweet.
you so many views in one day because your information is so good. And my
Thank
team's like,
you.
we're going to play Dr. Mindy today. I'm like, girl, play her all day long. So if
Thank you.
people in our office are listening, they know who you are. But if someone doesn't know who you are, how did you get here? How did you get started? Like what brought you to what you're doing today?
Yeah. It's so funny. Somebody asked me on a podcast interview the other day, they said, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "You're seriously like, do you have like 4 hours? I'm still trying to figure out who I am." So, and how did I get here?
Yeah.
I think to answer that is really, and I know you've seen this in your journey as a doctor, is that I really was looking for other solutions for my patients. And, I started off my healthcare career as a structural chiropractor, really focusing on the nervous system and brain health, and then got into a lot of nutrition and detox. And I'm sure you see this a lot where you get so focused on what's the best supplement, what's the best diet. And when I learned the principles of fasting, I realized that, oh my gosh, okay, wait, if we remove the food interference, the body heals itself. And the longer you go in these fasting windows, the body knows what to do, because as you and I know at the deepest level, there is an intelligence inside the body that's always working in our best interest. And so the more health strategies we can use that removes interference so that intelligence can go to work, the faster a body is going to heal. And so fasting for me became this incredible tool that everybody could use to remove the toxic food interferences that were happening in our world.
And this is, the thing I love, and I really want to get into this because I do have specific questions about women and fasting.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
with your book coming out December 27th, Fast Like a Girl.
Yes.
I'm putting the link in the bio. Everyone should get it.
Thank you.
There's a lot of conversation, and I work mostly with women, so I want to pick your brain about what you have seen as well. But there's a lot of conversation about whether women should fast, should they not fast?
Yeah.
What's the best way to fast? I mean, did you personally have to do trial and error through that yourself? Like what was that kind of journey? Because I'll just throw this out there and then I'm going to let you run with it. I don't know if you've noticed this. I do find that a lot of women it's easier for them to fast and not so much to refeed or to be more caloric restrictive than, increasing those mTOR pathways. But I would like to hear your journey, your personal journey with fasting. And if you've seen anything like that, like how it's different for women versus men.
Yeah. Oh my God. Such a good question. The reason I call it Fast Like a Girl is literally, I want women to fast like a girl. Like you should fast according to your hormones, and you should eat according to your hormones. You should exercise according to your hormones. There's so many things we should do according to our hormones that we are not doing. So with fasting, I got obsessed with Dr. Osumi's work when he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology for his idea or his concepts around autophagy, which is when we remove food, the cells heal themselves and they repair themselves. I got so obsessed with that idea. And then combined with Walter Longo's research that 3 days of a water fast can reboot the whole immune system, that I just jumped in my mid 40s to fasting a lot. Like I did a lot of fasting, like 5-day water fast, 1 meal a day. And I started to notice that I was going into perimenopause. Like I was going into menopause. I was in perimenopause, but I was going into menopause. My cycle was off. I was spotting. My hair started falling out. I started getting a lot of anxiety. So I ran a Dutch test on myself. And I literally remember the day when I got the results and I pulled it up on the screen, and it basically showed all my sex hormones were completely tanked. Like worse, they were worse than a postmenopausal woman. And so I went to, our mentor, Dr. Pompa. I think one thing that we as health practitioners have to keep in mind is that it's hard to doctor ourselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's really important that we get an objective opinion. So I showed him my Dutch test and he said, Mindy, you got to eat. What are you doing, girl? And I realized,
Yeah.
and he's one of the people I had learned fasting and detox from. And it was at that moment that I thought, okay, there has to be a cadence here. And I dove into understanding the sex hormones. And when I, for the first time, like Rebecca, I don't know if you've ever had this, but I'm like at 45 for the first time understanding my hormonal menstrual cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. That,
What?
which is crazy. It's nuts. Yeah.
Like we have the bigger conversation here is we have a hormone illiteracy problem, and it starts with women. Women don't know. So what I did is I started to dive into looking at what estrogen needed and when does estrogen show up and what does testosterone need and what does progesterone need. And what I discovered was that estrogen and progesterone actually need vastly different things. So estrogen needs you to keep glucose and insulin down. So anytime you go, estrogen's trying to come in, specifically the front half of your cycle, fasting's amazing. Keto is amazing. But progesterone, the back half of our cycle, we actually, because we're so brilliantly designed, we actually become more insulin resistant. And glucose needs to be higher that week before our cycle because progesterone demands it. So we need glucose high, we need cortisol low the week before our cycle in order for our uterine lining to shed. So you've got totally opposite personalities of these hormones. And I was just plowing through with keto and fasting all month long.
I
right?
I know that. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I created something that I call the fasting cycle, and it's in the new book where I show how a woman where she should fast and where she shouldn't fast. And then I started to dive into food and where does calorie restriction work? Where does carb restriction work? And where does it not work? And then, I mean, the cool thing about my journey is I've had this amazing YouTube community. I mean, we get hundreds of thousands of comments every week. So I just sprinkled out the information out there and we started to see a very consistent formula emerge on how women benefit from fasting. So that's how it got launched, but it's been now tested probably on millions of women. It's, to me, the only way that women can fast is using a formula that works within her cycle.
Now, do you find, so first question is, so you mentioned that with cycling. How about with women that aren't cycling? Like what kind of like path does the book talks about that too, right?
Yeah.
Like what kind of path then, because it makes sense to go with like when your luteal phase and your follicular phase, but how about for women that aren't cycling? How does that usually, like, how do you lay that out?
So the hardest part, thank you for asking that, because the hardest part that I've had is so many women have different cycles. And like, so when you say women who aren't cycling, my brain goes to the 65-year-old woman, but it also goes to the 25-year-old woman. It also goes to the woman with the Mirena IUD in, or some kind
that's a good point. I didn't even take into consideration IUDs or birth control and stuff. Yeah.
I had to think about all of that when I wrote this book, which is really hard to do. And it's like because for the let's use the 35-year-old woman who's on the Mirena IUD that has no idea like where her cycle's at.
Yeah.
What does she do? So here's sort of the broad explanation. In the book, I created a 30-day fasting reset that I'm hoping, because what I've seen clinically really worked, is if a woman doesn't have a cycle, that she just starts on day one and goes through for 30 days and then does that 90 day, 3 times in a row. So a total of 90 days. And what we've seen is that actually brings women's cycles back. I've had women that were not able to get pregnant because their cycle was so messed up. And I've thought that within 90 days, going through this 30-day fasting reset, that it would probably take about 90 days to get her cycle sync back up. Every single one that I put through this, within 30 days, they were pregnant. So, and what I did is just use diet and fasting variation and say, okay, let's just mimic this cycle. So that's the first thing. There's a tool in the, depending on where you're at.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a tool. And then also, I don't think I told you this. We also have an app. an app
Oh
that will,
no.
yeah,
No
Fast Like a Girl
way.
app.
Has it
Yeah.
been launched or?
It's going to be launched with the book. And when you get the
That's
book,
cool.
it's going to be, there's a QR code in the back of the book. So it's official.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Look
So
at that.
so my hope is that that women can really start to track cycles and look at patterns and use the app in conjunction with the book. So that's kind of my general answer. Now, let me give you some other really cool answers
Yes.
to
Let's
this
do that.
question.
Yes.
So, and I don't know, have you ever used an ovulation kit of any kind?
Yeah, I've done like taking charge fertility awareness for over 10 years. So cervical fluid, I haven't done actual ovulation strips, but I do cervical fluid, basal body temperature and graphing. So that's what I've been doing for over 10 years. But that was after I lost my menstrual cycle and my doctor said it was completely normal. And because my thyroid hormones were wrecked. So I felt like I needed to like take control and understand my cycle, but I haven't done ovulation strips, if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking is that ovulation strips could be another way, because in the book, in the tool, the dynamic tool that I give is called the fasting cycle. And so what I do is I show you the different length fasts that will work from like day 1 to day 10 of your cycle. And then you have to switch it when we get into ovulation. So day 11 to day 15, you need to change your fasting length. You need to change your food. Then when we come out of ovulation, we can go back into more keto, more carbs. And then around day 20, we've got to pull ourselves out of low carb, pull ourselves out of fasting. So I have a tool in the book to show that. So if a woman who doesn't have a very accurate cycle, but still is in her fertility years, she could do these ovulation strips and figure out where she's ovulating and then time her fasting of food according to that. Cause she doesn't, if she has the Mirena IUD, she doesn't really have a period to go off of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that would make sense. Yeah. Cause I think usually when I'm teaching like fertility awareness, it takes like a 4 cycle practice of understanding like ovulation spikes and temperature and spotting and what different things look like. So it takes time for women to actually understand their cycle if they're charting it, but it would make sense. Just see I will say this. I was very shocked going back to how many women don't know when they ovulate.
Oh my gosh.
You don't know when you ovulate.
No.
Or the fact that it's always very shock. I mean, I talk with women at all ages, or how shocking it is to make the connection that in order to produce progesterone, you've got to ovulate. And progesterone is more than just baby making hormones. It's like mental wellness. It's protective. It's your mental sane. Like it's so many more things than just getting pregnant.
Right.
So I think that is a good tool to start using ovulation strips to at least know when you stinking ovulate, how long your luteal phase is, like when you're in your luteal phase. It's really shocking. I actually had someone I was coaching who was having gallbladder attacks. She felt like they were just random and they were cyclical, but she hadn't been tracking it, wasn't tracking her ovulation, wasn't tracking like when they were happening. When they were happening around her ovulation, she had an estrogen dominance issue. So every time that estrogen would peak in the luteal phase, it would cause a gallbladder attack. But because she did not know when her cycle was, day 1 bleed to day 1 bleed, when ovulation was, when she was in the follicular phase and luteal phase, she was missing this pattern. Like she had done a gallbladder cleanse, she had done all this other stuff, but we noticed it was always after ovulation. It was this peak in estrogen. We worked on that and, she hasn't had it since. So, I mean, I think it's huge.
And so this is the thing. I was a couple of weeks ago, I'm a part of a mastermind group with Jessie Itzler, who is married to one of the greatest women of all time, Sarah Blakely.
You already know I'm obsessed, but yes, I watch it. I'm like,
I got to meet her, which I was like, some people would be like, have a fangirl moment with like, a superstar, but I'm like, oh my God, Sarah Blakely, you're my hero. Anyways,
side note. I saw she posted a video and you were in the background. I was like, of course, Mindy's in the background of Sarah's video, but yes, I feel you, but
she's as impressive as you think she is. She
That's
is
amazing.
what an amazing human. But one of the guys that helped her along her business path, and he actually was CEO of Spanx for a short period of time. When he was talking to me and he said, Mindy, I would tell you that you are not solving the problem of women not knowing how to fast to their hormones. You're solving the problem that women don't know their hormones.
Their hormones. Yeah.
He's like, I would go deeper in your message. And I would say to everybody listening, if you're like, what's follicular, what's luteal, what are they talking about? This is what we need to make a stand for as women, is we need to understand our hormones, and we need to understand what affects them. Like progesterone, for example. Do you know how many women in my Reset Academy will say, yeah, you know what? Like they put a CGM on and they're like, my glucose goes so high the week before my period. And I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Or people say my HRV goes up at different times of my cycle, like during ovulation. Yeah, because when hormones come surging in, there is a dramatic shift in our everything, from our heart rate to our HRV to our glucose and to our energies to our sleep. But we haven't been taught that. And so we have to start to learn these rhythms again. And once we learn them, we can then make a better stand for our health. We can go into our doctor's office with more education. So I think that's the biggest message here is get an ovulation kit so you know where you're at. Get on the Clue app. I love the Clue app, or in our new app, you'll be able to track your cycle.
Awesome.
So it's like, let's start like getting to know these hormones. Let's understand their personality. Let's understand what their needs are. And that's where we're going to start to get better health for women.
And that is amazing. And I think one thing I've always been able to come to you for through the years, like whenever I talk with you, because you have personal experience with this, and it goes back to this hormone situation, is like, there's times in our cycles when we can push harder. There's times in our cycle where we need to slow down. There's times in our cycle, well, maybe our brain isn't like on top of things and we beat ourselves up because we're trying to keep up with all these things. Like there's ebbs and flow within this like overall like monthly cycle where we need to give ourselves grace, and then we can push ourselves, whether that's in the gym or our exercise or our fasting techniques. And I think for women, when we don't honor that, like when we don't honor these ebbs and flow, we're just always going. And that's one thing I could always talk to you about with your experience. And I'd love for you to share that, because you did that. What is it? Russian woman syndrome, right?
Yep.
I think whenever I'm sitting one-on-one with a woman and, I talk to them about like, just because you can get stuff done doesn't mean you should, doesn't mean you're coming from a good place. Half the time they end up in tears because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Like, you're right. I'm yelling at my kids. Like, I feel like I'm always arguing with my husband. I'm just feeling tired and fatigued because I'm always going. But I always love your messaging on that, about like even your own experience with Russian woman syndrome.
Yeah, I think the Russian woman syndrome is such a powerful concept because, I was raised by a really powerful mom that was basically gave me the message that you're a woman, you can do anything you want. And so I was launched into the world with like, I can do anything a man can do, maybe even better. And I never I never stopped to acknowledge the soft part of me, the nurturing part of me. And it worked okay until I got into my perimenopausal years. And then all of my push on through, everything from the extreme exercise to the extreme fasting to the, extreme healthcare that I was doing on myself to be the healthiest version of me, I started to realize there needs to be softness. I need to bring back I can't do that. I need to bring back, right?
I can't do that. Yeah.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. But if we just make it simple for women, when we go to these sex hormones, when we look at testosterone, when we look at estrogen and we look at progesterone, they have vastly different personalities. And in the book, what I did, because I hate the word follicular and luteal, and I like to make everything fun, I basically call I created 3 different phases to a woman's menstrual cycle. And the one phase is called the power phase. And the power phase is when you
Ooh.
can push through, you can power up. It's okay hormonally for you to do that. And then during ovulation, I call it the manifestation phase, because
Ooh,
you can
yeah.
manifest a baby if you want to, but you can also, you have estrogen at her peak. You are wickedly mentally strong. Your verbal communication will be strong. Your ability to multitask. If there's any problem you need to resolve, do it during ovulation. In fact, I had this vision during the pandemic. I was like, we just need to get a bunch of ovulating women in a room together, and they're going to solve the problem because they have estrogen at its highest, testosterone at
Mhm.
its highest, and a little bit of progesterone. But
Yeah.
then the last phase where progesterone comes in is the nurture phase, and is what I named it. And I feel like that's where we have to nurture ourselves first. We have to go soft. There's a reason we don't feel like working out then. There's a reason we crave carbs. There's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
reason that all those social events we said yes to,
Yeah.
and now we don't want to do, because progesterone's sitting there saying, hey, nurture me, nurture me. And I came rushing into my 40s without that knowledge, and I struggled. And this is why I'm now writing all these books, is I feel like I want to turn around to the women that are younger than me and say, okay, let's do this different. It needs to be done different, because this is not serving us. I truly believe, Rebecca, that like cancers, hormone cancers, a lot of the chronic metabolic problems are because women are pushing through their cycle without acknowledging these different personalities.
I freaking love that. I did not know you did that, but that is beautiful. Like my gosh, I cannot wait to share that with like my coaching clients and stuff, like
Please,
that
please.
book and everything, because I love the way you changed the name though, because it's easier to kind of like put it together.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like I always get like, I'll never forget. I had someone, a woman that was doing like keto, and she was sticking to it and all this. And she was beating herself up because she's like, oh, every time I ovulate, like I'm like ice cream and I gotta have this. And she was like beating herself up because she wanted these like, like sweeter things. And I'm like, well, there's a reason why your body is drawing you towards that. Instead of beating yourself up, why don't we plan for that? Why don't
Right.
we give yourself grace and enjoy those higher carb meals that your body is telling you it needs, instead of like beating yourself up about it? But I do agree. I mean, we talked about this beforehand. I'm 37 weeks pregnant and I got to chill out. Like I got to like slow down. And I'm like,
Right.
what?
It's so hard because, and this is a really complex issue, but I'm so happy to be having this
Yeah.
discussion with you, because I believe women can do anything. I really do. But our hormones tell us we can do anything, just not every day of the month. So we need more softness. I look at women that are CEOs. I look at women that are in high stressful political positions, and my heart hurts for them, because they are literally pushing through all of their hormonal imbalances. And one thing I will tell you, in my work with Leanne, and she wrote the foreword, she tells her story of her hormones. But in working with her, I asked her at one point recently, I said, can you set up your tour schedule according to your hormones? And she was like, wow, I hadn't really even thought of that. And I think that's the kind of conversation that we need to start. Like, we're in sort of a patriarchal world, in this feminine, matriarchal body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as women, we need to come together and say, yeah, I'm a badass 3 weeks out of the month. And then I'm going to nurture myself and not conquer the world 1 week out of the month. And like, how do we go into that? Like, I'm just going to nurture and say no. And that is actually strength.
Yeah. Okay. That right there. I was going to say, because it does not make you weak to say no, to say, I cannot do it, to say, I need to get away from the kids, go into the room. I need to go do yoga. I need to go spend this time away. Cause I think for a lot of women, it's like, they feel they can't.
Right.
This idea that you can't, you got all this And I'm probably speaking even from like my 6-year-old, 5.5-year-old baby on the way to, two things
Yeah,
going, all
that's a
these things
lot.
going on. Yeah. And it feels like, I think sometimes even for me, it feels like I can't, like the world's going to fall apart
Right.
if I
Right.
don't do it all, which it never does. Right.
Yep.
And then also this idea that then I'm weak, right? Because I
Yep.
can't keep up
Yep.
with everything that we have to do, but it's not.
But
It's
it's
like,
strength. Like,
yeah.
so I went through this in backing away from my chiropractic practice. I mean,
Yeah.
we had hundreds of people like you guys pour
Mhm.
into our clinic. And I was like bending over the chiropractic table, adjusting hundreds of people a week. And when estrogen goes down, collagen goes down. And so this is why you see women start to wrinkle, but you also get more prone to injury. And I would come home at the end of a like long 10-hour day at 47 years old, and I would lay on the ground with my back hurting, my toe numb, and I'd sit there and go, what am I doing? This is not okay for me, but it felt like weakness. So it took me to really redefine that saying I can't physically do this anymore is actually working with my hormones. And the moment I said that, the moment I backed away from the activity that was no longer serving me and my hormones, I started to feel better. I felt more powerful. Like I was a better wife. I was a better mother. I was a better doctor. I could serve people better when I acknowledged where my hormones didn't allow me to keep pushing through.
I love that. And I think this is a really great conversation to have too, because I've worked with women going through perimenopause and menopause, and they work, and they'll take the break when they've retired, right? They'll take the break. I had someone who was like a CEO, or I'm coaching her now, like a CEO, did all this stuff. I mean, all day. I mean, she was going, and now she's kind of semi-retired, right? Like not fully retired. But then
Right.
she's like, well, I don't get it. Now I do yoga in the morning, and why is my hormones like a wreck? Like I'm now quote unquote retired. And I'm like, well, now it takes time to kind of reset that, because you went so hard for so long, and it affects your adrenals, affects your thyroid, it affects your sex hormones. So like not putting it off either. Like this idea
Right.
that like I can rest when I'm retired. I can rest when all of everything's
Right.
perfect, but taking that time to do it
Right.
now. That is,
Absolutely. And then to really talk specifically to your audience and the idea behind thyroid.
yeah.
Gosh, there's so much we could go into there, but there's like another example of how
Yeah.
we go against our feminine body when organs start breaking down.
Mhm.
They're not breaking down because you were given poor genetics.
Yes.
There's a message there. And if we're willing to listen to the messages of our body, and we're willing to be strong at some parts and soft at others, I think that hormonally, with the hormone system, that whole endocrine system needs that waxing and waning of
Mhm.
our energies. And if we are always pushing, we're going to blow through these organs, and you're going to see more thyroid issues. You're going to see more hysterectomies. We have women going into perimenopause at 30 now. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? That is a pushing
Yeah.
through and a not acknowledging. So we're rhythmic. We need to come back to that like rhythm and that dance with our hormones, and then we can do it all.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. So in your book, like, do you get into thyroid hormones and the connection with all of,
Yeah.
okay, touch on that then.
Yeah,
So many
I actually,
people-
this was really important. And I forget where I put it in the book, but I have a whole thing on thyroid,
yeah.
one whole section on it, because one of the misconceptions is that fasting, if you have a thyroid issue, you shouldn't fast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that for a
Yeah.
moment.
Let's do that. Go. Yeah.
So the research, I dove into the research, and I think you and
Mhm.
I think when you came on my podcast, I feel like we chatted about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but I dove into the research, and what they're showing is that calorie restriction causes T3 to decline. So, okay, calorie restriction. Fasting is not calorie restriction. So the first thing is we're talking about time restriction. So the first thing that we need to understand is when you fast, make sure you're fasting like a girl, you're fasting according to your cycle. And then when you eat, you need to eat. You got to eat. This is not when that eating window opens up.
Yes.
Your thyroid demands that you eat. So fasting got a bad rap for thyroid problems because people were doing, when they opened up their eating window, they wouldn't eat enough. So they were in calorie restriction. But for the person who has a thyroid problem, please, please eat. Even if you're in the first part of your cycle, you're in one of the power phases that I talk about, like, I still need you to eat. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is when you look into the science, what they found is that T3 went down in a calorie restricted state. But if you go and look at the other science that showed when you break your fast and you eat, that actually T3 doubled. It actually came back with a vengeance in a really good way, and you got more of it. So the problem with science is we can't look at these studies in a silo. Like everybody's obsessed with Huberman Labs right now. And there's, Rhonda Patrick and a lot of like great researchers out there. But we have to look at studies and say, this gets us in the ballpark, but now let's clinically apply it.
Yes.
So I think that's with thyroid, we have to understand that there's a possibility to actually heal your thyroid using fasting. And I have seen it. Even, I think I told you this story that I, early on when I was teaching fasting, I had this woman who had her thyroid removed, and she was really hard, kind of one of those patients that was like always kind of on you, like, and so she came in one day to me and she said, okay, this fasting thing is not working for me. I feel like I have a thyroid storm coming back. And so I'm backing away from fasting. And she's like, but first I'm going to go to my doctor and see what my doctor says. So she goes to her doctor. Turns out that the fasting was working for her, but she had to bring her thyroid hormones down because, and she had a full thyroidectomy, like the whole thyroid was gone. Yeah. But I think what happens is when you pull an organ out, the tissue is still there. There's still remnants of the tissue.
Always,
So that tissue was still, what we did is we cleaned the system up and the tissue started to produce the hormones again.
That is
crazy.
So amazing.
Right? And so I think what happened is she had to adjust her medication, and the thyroid storm was coming from too much of the medication.
That is, it's so amazing. I think that's also why I loved like fasting. I haven't done in 10 months now? But
right. Yeah. You're not in the fasting time. Don't fast if you're pregnant, please.
For a while. But I love the idea that like, a lot of times, like whether you eat a certain way or exercise, you can try to say like, oh, this exercise is what made me better. Like this food item made me better. But like fasting is a perfect example of like, no, you don't understand. It's your body. Yeah. It's your body that's making things better. Right. It's your body that's healing. It's your body that's regenerating. It's your body that's doing it. It's not just the keto or whatever. It's the innate that you were born with. We're just removing this interference. We're giving it what it needs, and it's healing. And I think that's really incredible. I think especially, I'm so glad you touched on the thyroid, because like the thyroid world right now, it's like there's one answer, Synthroid, and that's it. And for other people, if there's thyroid growth with autophagy, because I want to ask you autophagy and mTOR too after this, but like with thyroid cancer or thyroid growth, there's no questioning about it. There's no understanding tissues, healing, cell health, nothing. It's if there's a thyroid problem where you have nodules that are growing or you have thyroid cancer, let's just cut it out. There's no taking a step back and thinking about what can happen when the cells are well, right?
Yeah.
And then you get this, just like hysterectomy, you get this vital organ cut out. Cool. You can live with it, I guess, but now you're dependent on these medications. You're dependent on all these things and you're missing something that you were meant to have. So
yeah,
I love that that's in there because people really need to hear that message.
Yeah. And I think of all, just like we know, it's general knowledge that the heart and lungs work together as a team. Like nobody would like when we say cardiovascular system, we're like, yeah, those two, they are teammates. They have to work together. But when we say endocrine system, we never look at the teammates that pair up
No,
with the end,
yes.
right?
Yeah. That's
So
annoying. Yes.
it's really annoying. So like, I've been talking to the menopausal women saying it's not just your ovaries, it's your hypothalamus, it's your pituitary, it's your adrenals and your ovaries. That's the team. So when we
Yeah.
look at the thyroid, the team is hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, liver, gut, and you got to have those cells open so they can receive the hormones. So we can't villainize the thyroid. It's not the thyroid's problem. It may be a piece of it. It's that whole team. What is the whole team doing?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation I know you're having, but I think most people are not getting.
No. Well, but the thing is like, okay, so if you're a woman and you have an issue, then you go to an OBGYN for the sex hormone issue. But then if you have a thyroid issue, you go to an endocrinologist. And if
Right.
you have a gut issue, then you're going to go to a GI specialist, and no one's taking a step back and looking at it all together and saying, okay, this is how it's connected. This is how one affects the other. And that's how that cascade happens.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we just, as women, we need to reframe how we see our bodies, how we see how it's all connected, and like honor the healing process
Yep.
with our hormones. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now,
And
I
mean, that's such a huge point for those of you that are listening. Like, just remember that organs don't work in a silo, but endocrine organs really don't. So we got to look at the whole picture. And that's where, when we look at fasting, a 24-hour fast can heal the gut like nothing I've ever seen.
That's so
moving
cool.
into in and out of ketosis can really heal the liver, and it can heal the gallbladder and the common bile duct, which are really important area to open up so that we can actually break T4 down. Autophagy can get rid of old cells that are toxic and may damage the thyroid and the brain. So we can use the principles of fasting, knowing when to pull that tool out, when to put it back, and to heal the whole team. And for free. We can heal it for free.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right?
So I do have a question for you. I'm curious to see if you see any specific, like, and you don't probably like, do you work with like macros or calorie? I guess what I'm wondering is there like a certain number that you see for women? Because I feel like refeeding and like, okay, so there's fasting. Like, I feel like a lot of women I work with who've come to see me or found me online, they do keto or fasting, they understand the fasting part, but then what it looks like to actually like refeed like enough protein and fat and calories, like what have you found that those numbers look like for women? Or is there like kind of like a range, or like, how do you kind of break down refeeding, making sure that people are eating enough?
Yeah, this is such a good concept, because this also got really villainized in the fasting community, as a lot of people are against fasting, which is so funny to me. That's like being against sleep, sleep heals everybody. But everybody can't sleep. So fasting heals everybody, but everybody has a different pattern of fasting. So, so when I put the book together, it was really important to me that we did two things in this book. One, I show 6 different length fasts. So everything from a 12-hour fast to a 72-hour fast, why you'd want to do it, when a woman would do it. I mapped that all out. Okay. The second major concept was, what are you going to break your fast with? And this is really important. And I boiled it down to 3 things. So the first is, you want to break it with protein, and not every day, but you want specifically 30 grams of protein, because protein, when you come out of a fasted state, to your point that you mentioned earlier, we want to stimulate mTOR. mTOR is growth. mTOR builds muscle. And as women, we actually need to think about building muscle, especially the more we age. So we need to get a good amount of protein in that first meal. And if it's 30 grams, it will trigger an amino acid receptor site in the muscle that will build the muscle stronger. Now, what's interesting is, a lot of people say, well, a lot of women are like, well, I don't want to build muscle, or maybe they're fearful of building muscle. Guess what? The more muscle you have, the more insulin receptors you have. So you can actually pull yourself out of insulin resistance by building muscle, because now you have more gates that are open to drive glucose into your body, which is incredible.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Right. So the first one is protein. I really like that. The second one, and this is really important for thyroid, is you have to start to integrate what I call the 3 Ps: polyphenol, probiotic, prebiotic foods. And these are really important because they fuel a healthy microbiome. And your microbiome is not only going to break down your sex hormones, but it's going to break down T4 thyroid hormone and make it more bioavailable for your cells. It converts T4 into T3. So when we come out of a fasted state, what we've done is we've killed both the good and the bad bacteria. We've changed the dynamic in the gut. Now let's give the good microbes some food that it wants so that it can do the job it needs to do to be able to support the metabolizing of your hormones, all of them. And then the last one that I really bring in is fat, like an avocado or some good fat, because, and the reason that's so important is that I heard from my community a lot that women especially were like, once they opened up their eating window, they would just go to town. They were like eating everything. So if you put some fat in that first meal, now what you've done is you've stabilized your blood sugar, so you're not going to go crazy for the hours following that first initial meal.
So if someone's doing, because I actually had this question recently. So like if someone is doing like intermittent fasting, right? They're doing 16-8 or a little bit longer. Like what would be an example of that first meal that someone would break when they're doing an intermittent fast?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I break it with with a 16-8. One of my favorite is an avocado with sauerkraut and hemp seeds on it. It's like my go-to. Sometimes I'll even put an egg on top of it to get more protein, but that's a common one that I'll do when I want to feed my microbiome. The other meal that I break my fast with, I'll either do a protein shake with some aminos in it, or I'll do grass-fed sausage and get that 30 grams of protein. So those are kind of my go-to. In the book, I actually had a chef create some breakfast recipes.
That's so cool. I'm so excited to get this book. This sounds like a good guidebook. Like this sounds like
thank you.
Information and how to.
It really, what Hay House and I discussed when we partnered up together was that women needed a go-to manual, and that wasn't out there for fasting. There's a lot of great fasting books, but there's none that is like a go-to for women. And that's what this is. So it had to have all the nuance, all the questions around thyroid, perimenopause, but then it had to have new recipes. And then the most important for me was these break fast recipes, like giving you some ideas of what to break your fast with.
And there's two things that you've mentioned that I mean, that's how you know you have a really great community and you're listening to them. Cause like two things you've brought up already that I literally talk about all the time in my coaching clients is number one, protein. Women are very either afraid of protein or they don't even notice it. Like sometimes I'll have women count proteins and they might get 30 grams of protein in a day if they're lucky. And these are people that are eating, intuitively like healthy foods, but they're eating like 30 grams, maybe in a day, 50 grams, maybe in a day. So I see a lot of women not eating protein and not even thinking about it. And then the prebiotics, everyone wants to take a probiotic. Everyone wants to get bacteria in, but the prebiotic situation is like, well, you got to feed it now. You got to sustain it. You got to help it along. So with the protein thing, like so 30 grams in one meal, but like in the eating windows, like where do you usually see protein land for women?
Yeah, what I did in this book that I haven't done on any other social is I actually upped the protein to 75 grams, which is still a little low. So I talk about protein cycling in there. I think here's the best way I think we need to think about this is when hormones go high. So that's ovulation, or what I call manifestation, and the week before our period. So we'll just manifestation in the nurture phases. You've got hormones going high. When hormones go high, we need to change our food. And we need to actually bring glucose up a little more. And we can do that through carbs, or we can do it through protein. And I believe that those are the times that if you're scared to lean into the carbs because you don't want to gain weight, that you can raise glucose by protein. And even, if I could go and like rewrite some pieces of it, I would say there are times that 100 grams of protein is important. There's a lot of amino acid experts that really believe that you should do 1 gram of protein for every body weight you want to be. I will tell you, I quote a study in the book that talks about protein cycling. And I really like this for women, is that once you open up that fasting window, you do 30 grams of protein every 2 to 3 hours. And what that does is you give a little spike to mTOR and then you back away, and then a little spike to mTOR and then you back away. And what the research shows is that if you're eating somewhere between 30 to 90 grams of protein per meal, that you're positively stimulating mTOR. The minute you go over 90 grams per meal, you actually are going to turn that more into glucose that will be stored as fat.
That is really awesome to know, because like the whole protein glucose kind of connection there, there's always a lot of conversation around that. But that is beautiful. Like, and I love that for women again, because like I when I first started coaching, I really didn't do a lot of food diaries. And then when I started realizing, wow, women don't eat a lot of fat. They don't eat a lot of protein. I need them to see what's going on in their day. And the more and more I do it, I'm like, I feel like 90% of women would benefit from doing like that, like fasting and then jumping into this kind of like protein cycling, because they haven't done it. Like when I sit down with them and we look at the protein and how low it is, I'm like, when's the last time you remember even eating enough protein? They're like, oh, I mean, I don't know, maybe decades where they haven't eaten enough protein. And it's important for mTOR. Now, can you break down just really quick for anyone that might be listening, mTOR, again, autophagy versus mTOR. So like if someone's like, I have never fasted. I see a lot of listeners, they send me questions and stuff like that. I've never fasted. What is this autophagy and mTOR? And then where should I start?
Yeah. So in the let me answer the second question first. In the book, I create what I call a pre-reset, where you spend 2 weeks priming your body.
This is amazing. Like I did not realize it was all of this is in the, I legit just thought it was like, okay, this is how you fast for estrogen and progesterone. Like there's a lot. Okay.
There's a lot. I mean, this is why we needed a whole book. It's not as simple as just go without food. I mean, literally the book is 83,000 words. So I put a lot in there.
I love how you know the exact word count.
Well, because it was like after a while, I was like, oh my gosh, where are we going with this? But to answer your question is that what I think that we need to start to look at is that when we are implementing fasting in general, we are going into a state of autophagy. And think of autophagy as catabolic. It is breaking down what's no longer serving you. So we are getting rid of cells that are no longer helpful to you. And that is a beautiful thing. So it's a bit of a detox. It's a bit of shedding the old. But mTOR builds new cells anew again. So, let's take the person who discovers they have a thyroid problem, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm going to start fasting. Well, the thyroid problem happened because we have cells that are not doing their job. And we don't know where these cells are. They may be in the thyroid, they may be in the brain, they may be in the liver, the gut. We don't know. They may be the cells just can't receive T3. So let's get rid of the ones that aren't serving us. And that's what autophagy does. But then why I love this conversation around food is that now we have to eat the foods that create new cells that do serve us. So it's like getting rid of an old habit and bringing in a new habit. And we've got to have both. And that's what, to me, autophagy and mTOR are. Autophagy is shedding the old, and mTOR is bringing in the new. Now, the way a lot of people do mTOR in our society is they eat all day long and they're stimulating mTOR all the time. And that actually becomes dysfunctional. And then what I saw in my fasting community was people were fasting too long and they weren't stimulating mTOR enough. And so they were losing their hair, their cycles, and having a lot of detox reaction. But when you marry these two principles in a rhythm that matches your hormones, it all works. And that's what we've seen.
I love that. Again, it's both, right? It's like,
Both. Yeah.
it's this diversity of like feasting and famine that our body finds all these benefits in. And I love that. Yeah. I'm like, you listening, you talk about this. I'm like, man, I really want to fast. I'm like, wait, no,
No,
again,
you can't. I know.
But I'm like, man, yes, this is what it is. But again, I love the fact that it goes back to this is what your body is doing. Like so many women, and I get it, like so many women, especially within the thyroid community, sex hormone community, are going to their doctors and they're just pretty much sold on this idea that their body's this broken down machine.
Yep.
It is what it is. You having, menstrual cycle issues. Are you ready? Are you going to have any more kids? No, then let's have a hysterectomy. Right. Or if you do want to have kids, let's get you on birth control. And they leave there, they feel emotionally imbalanced. They feel emotionally, out of control, mentally not well. They're struggling with their body because they don't understand why they can't lose weight. And so we kind of are sold for years that being a woman is like a disease process. It's just something. Yes. Oh, you're hormonal. Oh, let's make fun of women that are, crying or angry before their period comes because that's just what it's like to be a woman. But it's not. There's so much more healing and potential then. I love that. And I love your message in that.
Yeah. I want to touch on that for a moment because I do think this is really important. Our friend Sonia, who is like, I look at her like she's like the Zen hormone goddess. I'm like, speak hormones to me, Sonia, please. It just makes me
whispered into my ear. Yes, of course. Yeah.
It feels so good inside. She told me about a book called the Dark Goddess Moon or something around like the dark side of the goddess energy. And in the book, it was really interesting because it talks about that the BC years, we used to be more of a matriarchal society. And in that matriarchal society, intuition, ceremony, connection with other women and community in general was the highlight of that society. Yeah. I mean, part of me is like, wouldn't you have loved to live then? Can you imagine if we were able, I dream of this world where we're able to say, you know what, like it's the week before my period. I'm going to go chill out for a week. I'll come back to the work. I'll come back to family, but I'm going to go nurture myself. Like I have dreams that that's what happened in that society.
Yeah.
But then, after that moment, we moved into a patriarchal society, and the patriarchal society is what we've been in, which is very linear. It's like, and our healthcare system is in this. It's like, you have this symptom. Here's your diagnosis. Here's your pill. It's very in the head, not in the heart. And what I'm not that, there's times where that's appropriate, but what I'm really advocating that we do is we step into a merging of both of these. There's a way we can bring the matriarch and the patriarch together, but it's going to require in healthcare that we say there's a time for the one pill, one solution. And there's a time where we just need to chill out and we need to just take amazing care of ourselves and give ourselves permission to rest. And we can bring those two things together. That's the world that I'm dreaming of right now. And I think that's what's been missing for women.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me two different things. I'll never forget. This was like 6 months ago or like last year. I had a mom in my office. She texts me and she's like, oh my gosh, she knew we're sick. She's like, we're taking this. I mean, she's taking all the supplements the right way, bone broth, all of this. What else should we take or what are we missing? And I'm like, you got to sleep. You got to rest. You got to like, you just got to give your body time and you got to disconnect. And it was like she did. That's not what she was asking me though. Right. I was like, what's the other thing I can take so that what I can keep going? And I'm like, but you can't. You have to rest. Like you have to allow your body to heal itself, and your body's telling you to slow down. For a woman, a lot of sickness, it's going to stop you in your tracks to slow down. So that reminds me of that, because she was like, I'm like, you got to sleep. Nothing else. Oh, nothing. No, you're doing everything great. You just have to rest. You just got to stop.
Yeah.
But that also reminds me too about postpartum.
Yes.
I think like just recently there's a doctor who was asking about like coverage, like postpartum. She was like, yeah, I'm going to take only a couple weeks off and then I'm going to be back in the office like part-time. And I think postpartum issues like depression and anxiety and those types of things is going to be a layered thing. There's a lot of birth trauma. There's a lot of things that happen, but I also think it's that community that we're lacking, this ability where people come around you and like allow you. There's a book called First 40 Days where it looks at like Eastern cultures and how and countries and societies and how historically and even now traditionally they allow the woman to cocoon away for like 40 days to physically heal, but also they talk about there's that spiritual mental transformation that happens when you have a child. Like you literally are changing, like you as a woman, your identity, who you are, what's going on, and physically healing because you've lost this organ, the placenta. But I think that's a big issue we're having, is that women don't have other women to kind of come around them and like cocoon around them and allow them to heal and to just do whatever they need to do and be celebrated in that process. And I think postpartum issues aren't going to go away until we can have more of that.
Yeah. And then we make the postpartum issues medical. We put the patriarchal lens on it. I love this. I love this idea. So here's what happens postpartum. You're getting a crash of those hormones and it's like menopause. And I can tell you the crash of hormones makes you crazy. It really, and your brain has to adjust. So like when you're pregnant, you're getting so much estrogen, so much progesterone. Like this is, one of the greatest, it's amazing, but then it all goes away and the brain has to calibrate for that. So I love this idea of 40 days and giving the body a time to recalibrate to that. Because if you push through, we're back at the same issue, which is we're not honoring this feminine body that we're living in. And she can push through at appropriate times. And the way she pushes through is because you allow her to nurture at the right times. And just like you need to nurture her the week before your cycle, you need to nurture her at postpartumly. And I love that we have like a time for that 40 days. That's amazing.
That's incredible. I love it. I will say it was like a little rude awakening because like I got the book just like, well, I've had the book. I took it out from the office and I sat down, and as I was reading it, I was like kind of held accountable because in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go back to physical in the office, but I can do this and I can do this while the baby's like, and I'm like, no. Yeah. We got to slow down. And there's more resources now. There's postpartum doulas and stuff like that. But I do agree with that. I wish there was more community for women. You see it on Facebook. You see it in these groups where people are coming virtually together because they're lacking that in person. But I think that's huge. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why I love discussions like this. And really my cry to women, I keep saying that Fast Like a Girl is like a coming out party for women, because I feel like what I'm trying to do is crack open the conversation that you and I are having right now. Yeah. Because when strong woman after strong woman stands up and says, I am strong because I take these moments to nurture, and we start allowing each other as women to do that. And we rally around each other. We collaborate. We don't compete with each other. We don't judge ourselves against another woman. We see every woman's victory as our own victory. When we can come together as women and support each other in what our hormones need, we will stop being sick. It's that simple. And so it's really important that we get to know ourselves and then we turn around and educate other women.
I will tell you this is just a good timing for this interview because I'm thinking in my head, like, and Nathan, husband, if you guys are listening, he's going to be like, I've been telling you that, but no, this is like so good. Cause I'm like, I need to honor that healing. I am, I'm done. These next couple of weeks, I'm done.
Excellent.
Postpartum, I'm done. I am going to honor that. Cause I'm right along there with you. Like you're preaching to me, I'm sure as much as you're reminding yourself of all of this. So thank you so much. Okay. So as we wrap up here, I'm going to ask you two different things. First, okay, if a menstruating woman, we're having some hormone issues, they don't feel connected to their body. obviously the first answer for both of these questions is get pre-order Fast Like a Girl, comes out December 27th. That's a good first place to start. But okay, so if there's a menstruating woman, where should she start? Like if you were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you're in this kind of chaos of everything, what are the first three things you would do? And then how about for women that are menopausal, where they feel like everything's kind of out of control, they're not having really answers, where would you start postmenopausal? So
Yeah.
those two right there.
So the answer, that the big overarching answer for both women, get to know your hormones. So for the menstruating woman, start tracking your cycle, get to know the characteristics and the qualities of these hormones. So, and then once you've done that, then yes, fast like a girl, start to learn when to bring food up, when to bring fast down, learn where fasting can serve you, learn where fasting shouldn't serve you. What I'm hoping with the book is that we can now have a conversation once a woman knows her hormones around when should you do cardio? When should you do weightlifting? When should you do yoga? When should you cold plunge? Like all of these things can now be timed to your cycle once you understand your cycle. To the postmenopausal woman, I would say the same thing. If you're still having hot flashes, if you gained a bunch of weight as you went through the menopausal years, if you're really struggling with mental cognition, I really want to tell you that there was a lifestyle that needed to shift at 40, because at 40, what happened is our ovaries start to decline. They go into retirement. The Menopause Reset, the book that I wrote before this, is all about that lifestyle change. I wish I could say it was available on Amazon, but Hay House bought it. And so they bought my other two books and they're going to re-put them out.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll come back out in a new form in May of 2023. But there is a lifestyle that you want to be living in order to start to balance these hormones out. And what I find with the menopausal women is most of them went screaming through those years, and they have the symptoms still because of the fact that they didn't change their lifestyle to match their hormones. So in the book, start with the fasting reset. Just start on day one and go all the way around and get to know your hormones, and then jump on the app, because I'm going to do a lot of education on the characteristics, the personalities of these hormones. Like estrogen, when estrogen is high, we are so crazy clear. And when progesterone is not high, progesterone is high, we're so intuitive and we go so within. And this is probably why actually a pregnant woman, we should have put all the pregnant women in a room to solve the problems.
Let us all figure out the problems. I mean,
because you have all those, right?
Hormones just coursing through my body.
Yeah. Like, I feel like you guys should be like, psychic, like fortune tellers. Like, if you have a problem, go find a pregnant woman and ask her to solve it.
Oh my God. Well, I think I'm at the point now where my body's like, all right, I need to like hibernate now. But
yes, excellent.
I do agree with that. Well, thank you so much, Mindy. Thank you so much. I'm going to make sure to put all these links and resources in the bio. But I appreciate your time and everything that you're doing for women everywhere. I just always remember you always show up. That first video that hit was like 1 million.
Yeah.
You just showed up at the end of a long day to teach on people, like love on and teach people. And that's why I know you're so influential. So thank you so much for your heart and for your knowledge. And, I can't wait to see you soon.
I know. Thank you. And I'm going to hold you accountable for rest. I'll be messaging you to make sure that
yeah,
I will. I'm not, you said it here. And this is what we need to do as women is really hold each other accountable. So now you're accountable to me.
Thank you.
Okay.